So here's the thing. In order for you to take contagious action, you need to be awake. Remember a time when you drove home and you got into your parking spot or perhaps in your driveway and you started to think, you know what? I don't even remember part of that drive. I actually did that with the CN Tower, but that's a whole other story. And I missed it. But what I want to do is this. I want to make sure that you're awake. So what I invite you to do right now is you're going to nudge the person. Hang on now. You're going to nudge the person. You're not going to shake them. You're just going to nudge them. And you're going to say, look them eyeball to eyeball, and I want you to say, it's time to wake up. Okay? So what are you going to say? Oh, you're amazing. You had some sugar, didn't you? Okay, so I'm going to count as 3, 2, 1. You're going to nudge. Remember, nudge. Okay? We're not going to shake. We're just going to nudge like you're waking somebody up to go to school or perhaps to work. And you're going to say, it's time to wake up. But say it like you mean it, not like, it's time to wake up. Okay? So on 3, 2, 1. You know, it was okay. I wasn't convinced, but I think we can do that again. But use your outside voice. I forgot to put that in the instructions. So on 3, 2, 1. Oh, you make me proud. Great job, everybody. So again, as I was mentioning earlier to you, in order for us to take contagious action, we must be awake. And I honestly think, at least I can speak for myself, that there's times where I'm sleepwalking. Can you relate at all? Yeah. And in order to take that contagious action, we need to be awake. You know, I live not far from here, just a village just north of here called Columbus. Has anybody ever heard of it? At least 3 people. No, a little bit more, maybe 5. No, I'm excited because, you know, truthfully, when we lived in Oshawa, I didn't know where Columbus was. So I get excited when other people do know. So on this particular hot July day, I'm standing at my neighbor's doorstep, and I'm just kind of doing one of these. Do I knock? Don't I knock? Do I knock? Don't I knock? I'm one of those people that sometimes has a hard time asking for help. Can anybody relate to that? Hands up. Oh, thank you. I'm not the only one. So no matter how small it is, it's a big deal. So I'm a work in progress, I admit. So I finally put my big girl pants on, and I decide I'm going for the plunge. So I knocked. And of course, I'm greeted by Bob and his big blue eyes. And he said, Cate, how you doing? What can I do for you? And I said, wow, Bob, it's not a good day. You know, Vic's working out west, that's my husband, and, you know, the lawnmower has completely gone, I don't know what's happening. I got a gang of people coming over this afternoon, and it's not working, and I don't know what to do. And I know you ran a very successful golf course, and I figured they might have lawnmowers on there. So I figured you probably could help out. Maybe you could take a look at it. Maybe it's just something small, or maybe it needs to go to Lawnmower Heaven. I don't know, but please help. So Bob, and of course, in his very short words, because he was a man of very few words, said, I'll be there in 20. It's like, yes. So I went back home, busy in the kitchen. And all of a sudden, I hear the lawnmower going, and I'm like, yes, it's the best day ever. He's fixed it. And as I make my way out to the backyard, and I'm looking through the window, oh my gosh, here's Bob like this, on a mission from God. He is going to actually mow our acre lot, and it was in the 80s. Did I mention that? The temperature was in the 80s, and well, so was he, as far as his age is concerned. So I went running right out, and I'm waving him down. I don't need this to happen, like him to die on my watch. So I'm running out and going, Bob, no. I didn't mean for you to mow the lawn. I just wanted you to look actually at the lawnmower to see if there was something wrong. No, I got this, he said. I got this. So I supervised for the next, of course, hour and a half, and ran out with water and all the things that I felt he needed, and he was my earth angel for that day. Doesn't it feel great when somebody just shows up for you? Yeah, it's pretty amazing, isn't it? You feel that sense of connection. Well, let me just get you kind of up to speed. You know, Bob's health has really deteriorated this past year, so much so that, in fact, he was house-ridden and sometimes bedridden, and his lovely wife, I think they were married 65 years, if I'm not mistaken. That's pretty cool, isn't it? That she was housebound with him. And I have to tell you, in our little village of Columbus, some pretty magical things happened. So I would observe different neighbors, you know, they'd be doing the lawn or the driveway, with, you know, snow blowing and making sure it was clean. And somebody else was dropping off treats, and somebody else it was dinners. And things just kind of magically happened, right? And as as I'm observing this, we thought, well, we need to pitch in too. We need to do our part. So my husband came with our 4-legged baby and had a visit, and another time I came by with banana bread just to cheer them up. Well, you know, Bob died this past summer. And his family, they know how to party. They had the most beautiful celebration of life for him, right in their very own backyard in Columbus. And it was beautiful. You know, we got to connect with neighbors and share stories with their family and their children. And of course, I got to speak to one of Bob's grandsons, and well, that's when I found out he doesn't actually fix anything. And it was so wonderful. It was so wonderful to be able to have that exchange. And as my husband and I were just arm in arm walking across the street after this beautiful experience and this connection that we had with our neighbors and their family, I shared with him just how my heart, kind of like what Noelle shared, because that's my favorite cartoon. Thank you so much. You know, it did. I felt like it grew. I really was so proud of our community in that moment. So proud of how these people came together during a very difficult time in Bob and Shirley's life. You know, and it made me think about really what is the heartbeat of our Columbus community. And safety was one thing, but it was so much more than safety. It was about acts of kindness. It was about supporting people, cheering for people. It was about love. So when you think of community, what do you think of? Really, there's so many communities, isn't there? It can be a sense of where people live. It can be your professional community. It can be your fitness community. Shirley, I know you're out there in the crowd. Yeah. It can be, you know, your nationality. It can be your church. It can be so many different things. But wouldn't you agree that what's happening in our day and age is that our social structures are starting to erode more than they ever have before? And we're craving connection. You would never know it though, right? Yeah, I'll be right with you. Yeah, you would never know it. But we're all inside craving that connection. We know that the human condition is such that, you know, we want to be needed, wanted, and loved. However, we want to feel a sense of belonging, right? We want to feel like somehow we matter. You know, I was so very fortunate. I had this wonderful, wonderful grandmother. Did anybody have a wonderful grandmother? Yeah. I'm going to do everything I can not to cry. Well, my Scottish grandmother was this really cool lady. You know, she always dressed well and took care of herself, and, you know, she always was about service. She taught me so much. But you know the biggest thing she taught me? She taught me about how to pay witness to another human being. So whenever you were in Nanny's, anywhere near Nanny, she would put whatever she was working on aside, because that became secondary. What became more important was you. And sometimes she said nothing. Sometimes it was how she cut the toast so you could dip it in the egg. All right, so I really did like that. But the point is this, what she did was, she let me know that I mattered, that I was loved. Isn't that what we all want? I mean, when you think about paying witness to somebody, what does that mean? I mean, for me, paying witness is like literally paying it forward. It's paying. It can be sometimes the dollar. It can sometimes be our time. It can sometimes be the words, like Denise said. But you see, I got to be awake first, number one. Remember, we talked about that. You got to be awake in order to take the action. Number two, you've got to pay witness somehow be present. And I think more than ever, we've lost that about how to be present, right? How to be present for the people in our lives. And that's my motto. I know it's so simplistic, but it's been my motto for years. So that when you are in my presence, I will do everything I can to make sure I'm not thinking about the next right thing to say or the next right thing to do or my to-do list. For me, when I think of community, I think of it almost like, in a sense, like a city school. When you think of a city school, what happens there? Kids interact, they play, they fight, they get along, they don't get along. Kind of like us sometimes, wouldn't you say? Yeah. But at the heart of any community, the heart of every neighborhood, is this sense of kindness, much like that of a school, where there's this sense of respect. I may not be crazy about you or your personality, but the principle is, I want us to get along. Isn't that what community is? I mean, if we don't take a step off that stress treadmill, folks, we're going to let it pass us by. All the cool things that attracted you to your neighborhood or your community, they're not going to happen on their own. They're just not. Has anybody been to one of the Columbus July 1st big bashes? Anybody? Hands up. Maybe 3? Okay. So 3 of you that have been there, you know that it's a pretty special occasion. And so what happens is that there is a great hot and cold breakfast, and there's a silent auction, and there's music, and sometimes there's dancing. Okay, well, I'm the one dancing, but there is some dancing, and sometimes you get your face painted, and it's just, there's a parade for the kids, and it's an opportunity, of course, to celebrate our great country, and it's also an opportunity for us to connect as a community in Little Columbus. Well, this July was no different than any others. You know, my husband and I went, and we were enjoying ourselves and having such a great time and laughing and just again, being with our neighbors. People that we pass every single day in our cars, much like what you do in your neighborhood. And so I ended up having a conversation with one of the organizers, and I said to her, you know, I don't remember seeing any kind of call to action for anybody to, you know, if you needed help or volunteers or anything. You know, I missed that. Was that written somewhere? And she said, well, no, on the flyer I did say my name and my number if you had any questions. And I said, however, but did it say that you were looking for volunteers? And she said, no. I thought that was enough. You know how sometimes it's not what someone says, it's how you feel? And boy, did you notice what I did there? I took the responsibility and put it onto her. Well, if you'd asked me, I would have showed up. I mean, I'm busy. I'm very busy, don't you know? And somehow I don't think that little fairies came along and, you know, put those chairs up or, you know, created the flyer or even delivered the flyers to each of our homes, or that, you know, somebody had to call the dignitaries to show up. You know, how did the breakfast get made and all of that sort of stuff? And I have to say, when I walked away from that July 1st, it was a very different feeling this time. I had to really take a look at me. Talk about, paying attention to the feedback in your life. That was an ouch. That was an ouch. So I'm really glad you showed up today, because I had an opportunity to do some reflection. Yeah, on how I was suiting up or not suiting up. But more about me later. What I want to share with you is something that one community did that I think is a true essence of contagious action. Let's take a peek.
It was just so great to see the whole country turn its attention to how can we help these people? How can we help the community? It's incredible what went on.
Our evacuation to Fort Hills was a very positive experience. I would hope that what Canada saw was what we were feeling. We felt safe knowing that there were industry partners all around us.
I don't think that there's anyone in this region that hasn't been touched by the love of a nation, quite frankly. When we first came back, the Plant Growers Association sent truckloads of flowers, and when the flowers arrived, I remember thinking, we so need a little color in our lives.
Something that really stood out for me is my neighbor, who had obviously been home before I was. He cut my lawn and left a note on my door that said, "I've cut your lawn just to make your re-entry a little easier." And that was very impactful.
During the fire, you saw those random acts of kindness, people lending gas to someone who was backed up on the highway, or just giving a ride during the initial evacuation. And I think you've seen that continue when you're at the coffee shop, and I've had multiple cases where someone's paying it forward. You get up to the till and the coffee's already paid for, and so you do it for the next person.
My wife and I went to an evacuation center. It was an Iranian family that we met when we went to Ambrose, and we thought, well, it would be good to go and encourage these folks. And one of the things that really struck me was how they were just overwhelmed about how everybody was caring for each other. And I think that's really what sticks with me, is that's what it means to be a Canadian and Albertan, live in this community of Fort McMurray, more than I think in any community we've been in, is these people care, they look out for each other.
I think it was day 1 or 2 into the fires. We'd been evacuated by this point, and the first responders were all crying out to us right now, we have no food, we need water, we need everything. They were asking for people's house codes, if they could go in, get their freezer, go into their fridge, So I put out a call on a video on Facebook, I said, hey, I need some door codes or something if they're in their area. And it blew my mind, the actual response to that one. At one point, I think I had 3/4 of the city's door codes in my possession, but everybody was willing, like at the drop of a hat, to be like, go into my house, take whatever you want, you guys just go take it, and make sure the city is safe.
When I arrived in the offices here, I saw all these boxes, and these were quilts that were donated by quilters all over Canada. There were some that came from the east, some that came from Lethbridge. They were all hand done, and they were literally in boxes and said to us, give these to people who have lost their homes. So we, in fact, donated all of those quilts. There's none of them here today, and I saw people leave the offices and they were just hugging these quilts because they meant so much to them. It was so overwhelming, and it's so special, and it is exactly what I thought Canada would be, but boy, did it ever feel good.
Despite exhaustion and despite other priorities, as we entered into town and we seen those fire trucks across Responders Way, it was beautiful, and it was just a real symbol of great pride in the work that had been accomplished across Canada, within our province, and within our community.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, do you not feel inspired when you see that? It's so touching, I know that there was mention there, they mentioned about quilts, and a very dear friend of mine, Gwen Holmes, shared with me about this really cool organization. Perhaps you've heard of it. It's called Victoria's Quilts Canada. Anybody heard of it? Hands up? Nobody? Okay. So what it is, basically, it happened many, many years ago. A woman by the name of, guess what? Victoria. And Victoria had very strong faith, and was a real church-going woman, and loved to make quilts. And so what she would do as an act of service and kindness is she would make these quilts, and whenever there was somebody in need in her community in the United States, she would give out a quilt. Well, that sweet Victoria came down, and she ended up with cancer. And so she would talk to her best friend Debbie about how she would get really chilled when she had to do treatments. Victoria did die, and her best friend Debbie thought, I've got to do something to honor my friend and pay tribute to her, pay witness to her. And And she thought, what can I do? What can I do? And she said, wait a minute. Victoria loved to make quilts. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to make quilts for people who have cancer. So she started off by having people in her little living room, and they started to make quilts. Well, let me tell you, us Canadians are pretty quick. So in 1998, a woman in Ottawa heard about this cool organization, that the whole core of what their organization was about, run by complete volunteers, was that what they wanted to do is they would send out a quilt to anyone that had cancer, not only to comfort them physically during those times when they were chilled, but also to give them spiritual comfort, to know that they were never ever alone. Wow, talk an act of contagious action, right? Right? Paying witness. So then from 1998 to right now, they have created over 60,000 quilts. 600 a month get sent out in Canada. So right now, for those of you who are on your phones, because I know some of you are, because I've been watching you, right? And we're usually the ones that need to be the most connected, don't you find? I catch myself too, don't get me wrong. And is that you can just Google and go into Victoria Quilts Canada, and anybody you know that has cancer, you can actually put their name in completely free of charge, and they will receive a quilt. I mean, is that not amazing? And how I found out about this was my good friend Gwen, who had cancer. Notice my language. And she said, Cate, when that quilt came to the door, I was just so moved that complete strangers would put this much energy, this much time into something for someone they don't even know. She said, I was so inspired, Cate, that I actually made sure that I had one sent to my sister out west. Yeah, 2 sisters with cancer. Gwen's sister died this past summer, and 10 days later, so did Gwen. Their mother is still alive. In fact, that mother is caring for my friend's blind daughter, who's in her 30s, who's developmentally delayed, and she also leaves her beautiful husband behind. But not without knowing that she mattered. I mean, of course, we all showed her love and connection, but here total strangers showed up and made this quilt. I mean, that to me is pretty magical. So back to me, Bogey. I see you here because Bogey actually and I were on the stage together. And I have to tell you, at one point when I was interviewing Bogey, what was that, 2 years ago maybe? Yeah. She said, Cate, it's not all about you. And I went, oh, really? So that was new information. We used to be friends. Anyway, not even looking at her now. But anyway, just to keep my hand up. No, I'm teasing. I love you, darling. And so where I'm going with all this is that when I really started to do the reflection, there was 2 things I needed to look at. And the number one was what was I pretending not to know? This is something I use a lot with my coaching clients. What was I pretending not to know about how I was showing up for my community? And I got to tell you, I had a lot of reasons. There's lots of reasons. I want you to know, like, I could give you the list as to why I wasn't showing up. I could give them to you. I could. However, the truth is, it's always a choice of whether I'm going to pay witness or not. I don't know about you, but I've certainly been walking down a street and sometimes someone's crossed over or hasn't said hello or hasn't waved. Well, maybe I owed them money, but my point is, we know how invisible that feels, right? We also know when someone makes a point of paying witness and paying attention to us, what that does to us. So I had to really dig deep, and I decided I was going to do this little bit of a there's nothing worse than a counselor actually analyzing yourself, but we do it. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do an inventory on myself, scale on a 1 out of 10. 10 being high, 1 being low. Where would I rate myself? A 5. Not so good. Not so good here. I haven't been suiting up. I haven't been paying witness to these people in this beautiful neighborhood of Columbus, probably for 9 months, because I've been so busy. I've been working on a major project. I've been working on my business, hey, family were coming into town, blah, 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 blah. You know how it works, yak, yak, yak. At the end of the day, it took me 5 years, us 5 years, to find just the right community, the right home for us to be in. And yet now, I'm sitting on my laurels. Because, well, it's just going to all appear, right? Not. So as I was doing that self-discovery, I started to think, you know what? I've got to make some changes. I've got to make some changes. I've got to make sure that very gift my grandmother gave me is something that I'm going to now be very consciously awake to then, in fact, be present for the people in my neighborhood. So the second part of that question was, well, where have I shown up? What am I pretending not to know about how, in fact, I have deposited into my neighborhood? Well, in a larger sense, because of this great, cool team that I work with, in the back row there, I see you guys. It's contagious. I mean, here's people doing cool things in the community of this Durham region. I mean, I'm a Torontonian, but I got to tell you, this feels more like home to me than anywhere I have ever lived. I mean, ever lived. And it's because of who lives here and how you bring your heart out. So as a result of the influence of these cool people in the back there, my speaker family, and Jesse and so many others, I then created just this past year, and in fact, I think about 12 sleeps we're going to be going, is my Unsung Heroes Leadership Program. And what that is I'm bringing Durham shelter workers and mental health workers to Arizona to a very specialized retreat center that work with EMS, people who are on the front lines, who experience a lot of, hear a lot of trauma. And then also I've hired a ranch for the day to also work with these ladies. Why? Because they are our unsung heroes. Who takes care of them? And this isn't about me, by the way. This is about all of the businesses and people that have written me checks locally in this whole Durham area. And some of them, by the way, are some of the sponsors for here that suited up and said, absolutely, Cate, you pour into these leaders, they will pour into their teams, they will pour into the women and children and youth that they're supporting that have experienced domestic violence, and they will then pour into their families, and the rippling effect is massive, like poof, blow your mind, massive. And I could never have done any of this. This is a we, and it all happened because I kept going, you're gonna give me how much? Like, well, I haven't even really shown you the postcard. I haven't filled you. No, I'm good. No. Really? Wow. At Valentino's Grand Salon yesterday, I think they had 8 or 10 of their stylists that showed up for my gals so they could get their hair, colored and cut and styled. And oh my gosh, they treated them like queens. It was beautiful. It was so wonderful to watch. These unsung heroes that everybody can sometimes forget. They're in the backdrops. How many unsung heroes are in your neighborhood right now? That maybe we certainly don't want to wait for a tragedy like what happened here in Fort Mac. So again, as I'm doing this discovery of where, in fact, have I deposited into my little community, I started to remember, well, wait a minute, the one neighbor, that's right, when her mother was dying, a few of us got together and did the doggy schedule and took care of the dogs so she could be with her mom. And then this one time, everything happens with the dog. I don't know, any dog people in the crowd? Yes? And maybe you walk your cat, I don't know, but I happen to have a dog, and so whenever we'd walk the dog, that's when the conversations would happen, right? It's like, especially, people would just come out and like, oh, that's what you look like, right? And you mostly know people by their dog's name, but so you know, this one particular night, I'm walking by the one house, the one neighbor's house, and their son came out, and he's in his 20s, and we just get into this conversation, you know, those impromptu conversations. And he started talking about his dreams, and that he wants to have this organic meat, and he wants to be able to sell it, and he wants to do this, and you know, when someone's talking about their dreams, they just light up. And I was just so into it. And I said, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I will be your first customer. I'll be your first customer. And he's like, would ya? And it was just unbelievable. And I'm telling you, it was a moment that I will remember. Why? Because this is about two people paying witness to each other. That's what contagious action is. And then it was several months later, again, walking the dog. It's always walking the dog. And he's out again. And I said, hey, I haven't heard your dog bark. You know, how's your dog doing? And all of a sudden, the tears came in his eyes. And I said, what? What? And he said, well, we had to put him down a couple of days ago. He was filled with cancer. I said, oh my gosh. And of course, the mama bear in me, I just reached out and I grabbed him and I said, I'm so sorry. That's so awful. And then I just stayed silent as he started to tell me all the memories about his dog and what he had meant to him, that he was a rescue, kind of like what he felt like. And a few days later, I popped a card in his door to let him know I was thinking about him, and a sympathy card. And I got to tell you, a week later, I get this thank you card in this very awkward, large envelope with the card, and just said, thank you, thank you. Thank you for being there for me. Now, I know you do that already. I'm just inviting you to dial it up. That's all. But we need to get off that step, that stress treadmill. You know what I mean? Like, that was me. I'm like a horse at the track. Oh, I wish I could volunteer, but you know what? He didn't ask me, so I can't do it. So blah, 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 blah. And meanwhile, if I don't take the time to step off, how can I show up for you? Because you and I both know when you give, you get. So let me just bring it back up to date. What about Bob? Anybody see that movie? Must see. Write that down. So I just need to tell you that Bob did so much more than mow our lawn that day. He paid witness to his neighbor that was probably more afraid and overwhelmed than she realized, having to take on so much while her husband was away, and really had a tough time asking for help. But he showed me, by just suiting up and paying witness, that's all that needs to happen. But we need to be awake. We need to pay witness. And we need to take that one step of action. And it will change your life forever. What contagious action will you take when you leave here? That's what matters. Thank you.